liberty means anything, it is the right to tell people what they do not want to hear. Good evening and welcome. This is Face the Nation. We're joining you at a time when freedom of expression really is a treasured fundamental right here in Sri Lanka, and people have seen the results of being able to say what they think, what they feel. And this was personified in the Aragalaya that swept across Sri Lanka, causing a change in the government, in the political structure here in Sri Lanka, the likes of which has never before been seen in our beloved nation. And to discuss the freedom of expression here in our country and how far really has the current pieces of legislation that have been passed in Parliament and that are currently pending would affect the freedom of expression here in Sri Lanka. We've got with us an expert panel, of course, as we always do. Starting first, we've got Dr. Ajantha Pereira. She's an activist and also a former presidential candidate. Thank you very much, Dr. Ajantha Pereira, for joining us on our program this evening. We've also got with us Professor Rajiva Vijayasinghe, a former state minister. Thank you very much, sir, for joining us on our program today. We've also got with us Ambika Sadgunanathan. She is a member on the UN Voluntary Trust Fund for Torture Victims and a former commissioner of the Human Rights Commission of Sri Lanka. Thank you very much, Ambika, for joining us on our program today. And we've also got with us, no stranger to the show, President's Counsel UR De Silva. He's an advisor to the Ministry of Justice, the chairman of the Bureau of Rehabilitation, and also the former president of the Bar Association of Sri Lanka. Thank you very much, President's Counsel UR De Silva, for obliging and accepting our invite, as you always do. Your presence here is, of course, much valued. Well, getting right into the discussion, starting off with Dr. Ajantha Pereira. Now, Dr. Ajantha, you are a person, of course, who use your freedom of expression to the utmost. We've seen you out on the street protesting, fighting for the rights of the general public, and by the looks of it, for the most amount of time, I think you've remained peaceful in your protest, unless, of course, there might be other parties that think otherwise. But Dr. Ajantha, before we get into the substance of the matter, recently you faced a serious incident, of course, while you were protesting. Now, we had a time when people used to come and flock at Galle Face, stay there overnight for months on end, and their freedom of expression was protected, much to the credit of the government at the time. What do you feel now, post-Aragalaya, post this reawakening of the general public? Do you feel safe to protest? And could you give us a little bit of insight on what happened that day?
Yeah, thank you for inviting me, first of all. It's great to be here. I just want to say a little bit about the incidents itself, and I think that will help us to understand the situation at the moment. Basically, we have on every Thursday we have a silent protest at Liberty Plaza, near the Liberty Plaza roundabout. So on that day itself, I mean, after a while only I went to that protest. Basically, we talk about the issues in the country at the moment, escalating prices, difficulties for living. And when I went there, there were a number of policemen there. So I just went and greeted them, said hello to them, and I said, okay, we are going to start the little campaign. So I went to the other side, and I was holding a placard. While I was holding the placard, I saw from this side, there was a group of people who suddenly appeared. It's as if though they were brought by in a vehicle, and they all got off. And there were about 30 people. So we thought that looks a little strange. It looks like another protest by itself happening on the other side. And then they were waiting to cross the road. At the same time, I looked this way where the police were, and to my surprise, the greatest surprise was the policemen were walking away from that side, and they were going towards the Arliyagaha Mandira, towards their station. So I was a little puzzled. There's a huge number of people trying to come to our side, across the road, and then the police were walking away. And then after a little while they came, and I was not sure as to what was happening. They came behind us, and suddenly You know, they walked to us and they started to tell us, there's no issue in the country. Everything is fine. We have money. No petrol queues. You know, no diesel queues. So why are you protesting when everything is okay? So we looked, there was a man wearing a red mask, a red t-shirt, and he came very close to me. And, you know, he was kind of, I saw that he was becoming aggressive. So I said to him, I called him Malli. I said, Malli, if you find that everything is okay with you, well, you know, you just go on. And we will protest. Because we believe that there are things to be changed. So that's why we are protesting. And then all of a sudden the others also came along and started shouting, you know, remove everything. I mean, remove the national flag. You have no right to hold the national flag here, you know. And they were coming very close to us. And as women, there was another lady, Fatima, and they were coming very close to us, I mean, touching us and saying, you know, trying to push us. So we were a little surprised as to what's going on. I mean, we didn't expect that. And then they started to remove the national flag. They started to remove the posters. And all of a sudden it became very frightening because they were coming very close and they were showing their aggressiveness. And one thing I noticed was they looked like they were under the influence of drugs because they did not know what they were doing. They couldn't even walk properly. You know, they were moving here and there. And it was a very frightening incident for us. And then they removed, very quickly, you know, they were trying to tear apart all the posters. And then by that time we realized we can't be standing here because they were very coming close to us and they were trying to touch us. While they are the way they talked to us was, they would come very close to us. I mean, their faces would be like this and they are trying to show their aggressiveness. So what we did was...
What were you said there were a number of police officers there. What were they doing throughout all this?
They left. There was no police, not even the traffic police. So what we did was we gathered the posters. Actually, Fatima gathered the posters and we walked to the aisle where normally the policemen are. So we felt if we go there, people can see us better. So we were standing
This was in the middle of the road. This was in the middle of the road.
Well, pavement.
Yes, on the island. So then what happened basically was they also came there and they started to push us a little bit. You know, we kept on saying, don't touch us, don't touch us. But they kept on trying to touch us and just to put fear in us. So I told Fatima, look, if we stand here, they're going to become very aggressive and we won't be able to control them because it's only us. Let's sit down. When we sit down, we would feel a little safer because, you know, everybody would see if they're trying to lift us up. So we sat down. When we sat down, about 40 people just surrounded us. And some of the people were, you know, lying on the ground, like as though they were sleeping, and they were literally touching our legs. So we said, don't come anywhere near. And we said, the only way I could defend myself was I basically screamed, don't come near us, don't touch us, and kept on screaming. And the word that I could think of was Sri Dushane. I couldn't say any other word. So I kept on shouting like that, you know, Sri Dushane, Sri Dushane. And I really want to say thank you to the media that was there. I saw the Sirasa media was there, you know, and he was there, literally holding the camera on us. And the YouTube channels were holding their cameras on us. And I think that protected us to a large extent. And this went on for about half an hour. And they were all the time coming very close to us, you know, and this was the fearing part of it. I mean, they were tormenting us. They wanted to somehow get us to go. And this was going on for about half an hour. And then all of a sudden, a police jeep appeared. And the good-looking OIC of Kolpiti police got off with his sunglasses. And just like a hero in the Hindi movies or the Tamil movies, and he got off and he walked to us, and I was thinking, you know, wow, you know, good timing that he's coming now. And I wanted to tell him what happened. He didn't want to listen. I tried so hard to talk to him and say what happened. He didn't want to listen. He walked straight to the people, the thugs, and he tapped on their shoulder and said, "Gedara yanda." I mean, this was so bad because he didn't want to know what was happening. He just wanted to get rid of the evidence. He didn't want us to know their names. He didn't ask them where they come from. It's as if though he knew who they were. The show is over. Hero has appeared, saved the innocent women, and then he comes and says, you know, everything is over.
Dr. Ajanta, well, of course, there is video footage of what happened there.
Exactly.
Just like you said, there were media stations from all major media companies in the country covering this incident. Then, in addition, of course, social media activists also were present at the point. But however, due to the current situation in the country and the fact that now with new pieces of legislation coming, dictating what is true and what is false, I must remind all the panelists that they need to take responsibility for the statements that you make on our program. As to the truth and authenticity of those statements will, of course, come under the scrutiny of the government very soon once the online safety bill is passed. Thank you very much, Dr. Ajanta, for that opening statement. We will get into the details of that as we progress. Professor Rajiva Vijayasinghe, you two were quite vocal activists. You took a slight time off. Well, now you're back. Thank you very much for joining us. What do you really think about what's happening in Sri Lanka in this very crucial election year? This year is unlike any election year that has come before. Elections have been postponed so much, and people are waiting. People are eager to vote at an election and appoint their leaders. And what better time to do that than a time when a country is in crisis? But do you think there will be enough information to go around for the general public to make an informed decision on who to vote this time around? Your time starts now.
I don't think there's any doubt that everyone knows that the right thing to do is to vote the present government out. I don't think anyone has any doubt about that, except the few people who think, as Ajanta was told, no, everything is okay because there are no petrol queues. You know, I was horrified to find leading economists sort of saying, you know, maybe we shouldn't have elections. Then they apologized and said, no, we didn't mean that. You know, Indrajit Kumarasamy, Nimal Sandaratna said, we're doing very well. Nimal has now started saying, no, we're not doing very well. The government is not doing anything the IMF told it to. The corruption continues. Money is not being cut. So even this elite, which was, you know, being very jolly about how things are better than they were, are now beginning to realize that things are just getting worse and worse and worse. But I don't know why anyone is surprised. You know, because this has been the history of Mr. Wickremesinghe and his role model Jaya Jayawardena. Repression, repression, repression. You know, people have forgotten 1983. And you see, there is a big difference between what I would call the shortcomings, the corruption of other politicians, and the ruthlessness that Jaya Jayawardena set up. And I don't know why people have forgotten this. You know, we talk of elections being postponed. I didn't hear the activists protesting when Kadu Jayasuriya perverted the bill. You remember about 5 years ago?
Provincial Council.
How they stopped the elections by smuggling in different amendments. There was no protest. I think the Human Rights Commission didn't object at the time. There was absolutely nothing because, you know, everyone tends to rally around their chosen person. And in Sri Lanka, it's unfortunately the person who is the opponent of the person they hate. And of course, what none of these people realized when they were running after Ranil Wickremesinghe was that he would jump onto the Rajapaksa side long before any of them would. And he would actually give professionalism to repression in a way that Gotabaya never did. You know, I still remember, I kept saying, why are people insisting that Gotabaya must go if they don't know what is going to follow? I used to tell my good friend Dan Jayatilaka, who by that stage couldn't stand Gotabaya, you know, why are you asking for him to go? Do you know what's going to follow? And look what they've got. And there's a wonderful cartoon the other day showing a face made up of Ranil and Mahinda Rajapaksa, the features, the worst features of both. And what you have now is a situation where the repression that we had again and again and again in 1983, in 1987, is being repeated. You know, the thugs you mentioned, who have people forgotten Kalulaki? You remember when the Supreme Court judges were jeered at? And he said, I'm an ordinary citizen, and then it turned out that Ranil had signed at his wedding 2 weeks before. You know, he was a card-carrying UNP member, as doubtless your thugs, well, I won't say UNP members, but they were part of this whole establishment. And that has now been grafted onto massive amounts of funding that keep the elite going. But the hope, I suppose, is that, you know, your thug said everything is okay. I mean, you and I know how people are suffering because of economic deprivation now. You know, the people who have cars have diesel and petrol. But as Nima Sandran said the other day, nothing has been done to cut the perks. The number of vehicles that go around with all the ministers, how much do they cost? I still remember, I mean, I don't understand, but when I became a minister, I was told I had 14 vehicles. I said, get rid of all of them. And Kabir Hashim promptly came and took them. Because, of course, as Chandrika said, I'm going to put someone on top of you because you won't tell me, you won't do what I told you to. So they appointed Kabir Hashim. And Kabir Hashim's sole purpose in life was to get all the vehicles. So his relations turned up and took all the vehicles. I mean, that's a fact, and I stand up for that. So this is what's happening. And, you know, there was no concern about being critical of these people because they were the chosen government, they've got rid of the Rajapaksas. No one believed that the minute you abandon all principles, you're going to have this wonderful coalition. And as you said, it's only up to the people to exercise their votes. But there'll be desperate attempts to postpone voting. Don't forget, the UNP is past master at postponing voting. The referendum.
82.
Then, of course, you had Karu Jayasuriya. You know, Karu is now dancing around pretending he's a Democrat. You know, he was the worst speaker that we've ever had. Because he, maybe Mahinda Yapa is trying to, you know, do better than him. But he just allowed those perversions of bills, just as it's now happening.
Well, Professor Rajiva, we will get into the details, of course. Many names were mentioned, many individuals were referred to. They don't have, of course, representation here. They're not here to defend themselves. But of course, as I said before, each speaker needs to take responsibility for the statements that they make on this program. Let's move on to the opening statement of Ambika Sadgurunathan, former commissioner of the Human Rights Commission. Well, as the you know, as a member of the Human Rights Commission, of course, you fought for the rights of the general public. Where do you think fundamental rights or the access to fundamental rights stand right now as it is in Sri Lanka?
Well, I think, as Professor Vijay Singh has said, some might disagree that we actually fought for people's rights when we were on the commission, but, you know, be that as it may, I would say that in Sri Lanka, if you look at the history of Sri Lanka, no government has had a monopoly on repression, right? I mean, the UNP clearly, it was 83, there was 87, the JVP, etc. Then, of course, we had the Rajapaksas, where we had wholesale repression. There was a climate of fear, particularly in the north and the east. Civil society couldn't function, military intelligence would turn up, etc., etc. NGOs were hounded, you know, CID turns up, and freedom of expression in particular was definitely, people were afraid to speak up. There were instances where even, you know, you had a lecture about a conceptual issue, and what happens is that you are thought to be, or you're portrayed as someone who is threatening national security. Now, that national security has been used, even if you look at the laws now, that the ATB, the OSB, national security is a blanket term that has been used by every single government. No one can say they have not, to crack down on dissent and curtail freedom of expression. So I would say, you know, if you look historically, even during Yahapalana, there were certain things that did improve, because we did have, for instance, right to information. And that is something that the public, as we have seen particularly in the last few years, the public have used that to expose corruption, to hold public officials to account. So there were certain good things that did happen. But of course, even during that time, for instance, the military security apparatus, that did not change. The way they behaved in the north and the east, the way they surveilled the mothers of the disappeared, that did not change because it was really entrenched during the Rajapaksa regime, and Yahapalan really didn't do anything to dismantle that. And we have, I have personal experience as a commission member going to a village in northwestern province where the Navy, who had a camp just next door to the village, they turned up asking me why I was there. What authority did he have to do that? We wrote to the Navy commander, right? So my point is that we cannot praise any particular regime here because all of them have been quite awful. It is all relative as to which has been, the least worst option. And therefore, I would say right now, what the current government is doing is through passing these laws, they are trying to crack down on dissent, and they, instead of the white vans, what we have now is bill after bill that we cannot even keep up, right? Whether to challenge it, to analyze it, we cannot keep up. Now they're going to amend, I think, the penal code. They're going to amend that. We had the microfinance bill. They're bringing the NGO bill. There is the Commission on Trust, Unity and Reconciliation. So it is through law. They're weaponizing the law rather than using brute force. Brute force is what we saw during the Rajapaksa era. Now you have weaponization of law, but once again to curtail civil society, to curtail freedom of expression, and public officials, for instance, are not performing their duty, like the police in your case, and even public officials are not being held to account, the immunoglobulin scandal. So I would say fundamental rights are still under threat.
Thank you very much, Ambika Sadhguranathan. Since you brought up the immunoglobulin scandal, there was a protest that was held right in front of the CID, and those protesters were just demanding for the then Minister of Health, to be held accountable for the immunoglobulin scam and for action to be taken. However, these protesters were arrested, and we haven't still got an update on whether or not they've been granted bail. However, moving on to President's Counsel, you are De Silva. Now, Mr. De Silva, you are an advisor to the Ministry of Justice. You are the chairman of the Bureau of Rehabilitation. Of course, you have your arms in the government as well. So what would be, much was spoken of freedom of expression in Sri Lanka and how, well, if I gathered correctly, how bad it is right now. What would be your response as to, is this really what is happening in Sri Lanka?
Now all my colleagues, they said what is happening in presently, but that is a fact. So are we going to criticize this and then see another people come, they will do the same? What is the purpose of that? So my point is that we know that they are not, the politicians are not doing this to the betterment of country.
Okay.
So then what are we going to do? The Aragale is not the thing that, because they don't have a leader. They just came and then they tried to sabotage, and then what they did, we saw. They can't go and burn government property, and they can't enter by force. So we have to talk about that also. The people who started it in a better way, and they want to show their protest, as she told me, Doctor told us, she who did it in a better way, and she protested in a way that people will accept. That is called freedom of expression. But the fact remains, now when they were doing that, another set of people, they also come and say, this is what we think freedom of speech. So they say we have the liberty to protest and say you all are doing wrong thing. That is not correct. That is not correct, because they are purposely, as she quite correctly pointed out, you do it in a separate way. You do it that you have the liberty, but you can't come and threaten us or do harmful act for our protest. So that is how it is happening. People talking about freedom of expression, but they are not concerned about Article 15. They are talking about only 14, but they are forgetting Article 15. The classic example is that Dr. Ajanta was doing in a proper way. That is the Article 14. The others have come and threatened and done wrong thing. So what is the police did? So police are not doing that. So they are not allowing us to do our freedom of speech in a proper way. So now what the people now, Sajaba, they were rallied down and they were marching. But what is the purpose of going to Arliyakaha Mandire or any other government institution, and what are they going to do there? So that's what I am telling you. You have to accept the fact that there are limitations. So if we are not going to do it in a proper way, if we are not going to understand our limits, then we are talking nonsense, because we are talking about freedom of speech unnecessarily. But people, you said that we want election. People say that they want election. For what purpose? So now Rajiv said that, so what are we going to do? Without amending the constitution, without amending the parliament election system, are we going to change the government? No, these same people, they will get into various groups and they will come again to the parliament, because we will go and vote for the same people. Nobody has come forward and given us a proper way of doing things to the country. How they are going to develop the economy? What is their attitude about the fundamental rights? And what are the things that they are going to do for the tourism industry?
But Mr. De Silva, I think one of the main criticisms was, of course, these, as Ambiga pointed out, are these bills that are being brought over and over again. And I believe the fear around these new pieces of legislation and why the people are so skeptic about it is because of how the existing laws are currently being misused. Now, take for example, a social media person who runs a YouTube page called Piap. He was arrested for posting a clip of a call that was held with the Minister of Public Security.
Yeah.
And he was arrested under Section 120 of inciting dissatisfaction against the government. Disaffection against the government.
Yes.
And of course, I listened to the clip. There was no disaffection. There was absolutely nothing. So when state institutions or authorities that can enforce the law are misusing these laws that are meant for other purposes, when you bring in new laws like the Online Safety Bill that, gives powers to this commission that has been appointed by the president to decide on what is true and false, that's why the people are skeptic about it.
No, I don't think what is your point is correct. Because now at the moment, they are doing it not in a proper way. No. So there is no online bill. There is no online bill, yet they arrested this person.
So what Ambiga is saying is correct. They're weaponizing the law. Is that what the government is doing?
Not that. You are not correctly using that.
Okay.
Because any law, you can use it in a better way or in a different way to harass people.
So, Mr. De Silva, just let me get this right. Now, what you're saying is, now, let's take, for example, the situation of Piat.
Yes.
He posted a video that's completely harmless, but was arrested under Section 120.
Totally wrong.
Totally wrong. So you're saying now that the OSB is there, the government this commission appointed by the president can say, oh my gosh, no, that's a false statement that is hurting the feelings of...
You say like that.
No, I'm just saying, is this what you're saying?
No, that is not correct. If the police...
And arrest him the correct way.
No,
is that what you're saying?
even if it is not there, they will do it. Because we are not endorsing that. We are not ready to say that police have done the correct thing. I say it's totally wrong. But yet this bill was not there. So then even that also, even any law is there, the police will misuse it. That is a fact.
Can I ask you a question?
I think we'll open the floor for questions from our journalists because they are eager to get in on this action. Nadeem Majid, no stranger to Face the Nation, and Niresh Eliathambi. Yes.
You see, what I feel, Mr. De Silva, is that at some point, people of integrity must resign. Don't you think that time has come for you now? No, I feel very strongly about it. Most of you have forgotten but way back in 1980, I resigned from my government job when Mrs. Bandanayaka's civic rights were taken away. And the whole elite mocked me and said, you don't know how bad the 70s were. 2 years later, they came and told me, no, you were right. This was dictatorship. And 1980, I realized what was happening. I think people like you must stand up at this point.
But I mean, Professor Vijay Singh, the problem with resignations is if you say that everyone's, if you are working, let's say, in an independent commission or as the chairman, head of the Bureau of Rehabilitation, or let's say you're in the police commission, because we've seen this happen before as well, right? During the Yahapalanya regime, there were multiple independent commissions were set up to ensure checks and balances. There are instances where Professor Siri Hettige, Police Commission, resigned. Multiple other commissions as well, but that's the one that comes to mind. I mean, if everyone's just going to resign, who's left to run the state?
No, it's a critical mass. You see someone like him, who has a high reputation for integrity, if he resigns, it sets a trend. I'm not saying that people will follow immediately, but I think there are enough people now who have begun to realize that you have to make your protest.
Professor Vijay Singh, you know, I used to think that way as well. We had first 5 MPs who made their asset declarations public, then it went up to 12, and it went no further. So I'm trying to figure out if 12 is not critical mass for 225, or if 20 is not critical mass for 225, what is the critical mass for 1.5 million public servants? Is it 100,000?
It is not up to you. It is not up to people to decide and say, my little gesture is not going to have any effect. It is up to everyone.
No, what I'm saying is there something better that you can do to correct these issues?
That's the thing
from
I'm doing.
within the
I think it's wrong for us to speak about President
throwing him a challenge.
third person while he's
Now he will tell us what he'll do.
Yeah, so yeah.
He will tell us what he'll do.
Resigning is a different thing.
Okay.
By merely because I resign, that does not mean that all things will happen in that way. But I am there to criticize and try to ask the government to come to a certain proper place. Otherwise, by everywhere when I go there, and if I'm not satisfied with the way that they are going to, I will resign. No, that is, to some extent I will agree with you. If they are not doing it in some way, that I can't tolerate further. But at the moment, what I am doing is they should bring laws that is perfectly right. They should, but they should allow the others to discuss this. Now they have been given the opportunity to come and express their views. She was not asked to give her expressions, her views. So that is what the lacking part.
I also want to say something very, very strange that happened at the police station. When I went there and I wanted to make the complaint, I want it to be written. So when I walked into the police station with the other lady and Imran, when I walked in there, the policemen were all telling me to go and meet the OIC. So I said, why should I meet the OIC? I only want to make a statement. I mean,
you said
I want my
nice guy and
complaint to be written.
Thought you were fond of him. That's right.
You know, and complaint to be written. So then at last, after a while, a person came and sat down and he said, okay. Then he asked me for my name, so I said my name. Then he asked me for my address. And immediately he got called. He was asked to come, so he left. And then he came back and he was trying to again start, and again he was called. So he was disturbed several times, and then he at last came and sat down and said, I'm so sorry, you know, to take your complaint, there should be a female police. And I cannot take it.
Wow.
So I can only take the complaint from a man, right? So they waited for females to turn up, and 2 female police officers came. And then, you know, they turned and looked at us and said, are these the 2? That's how they talked to us. And then, very strangely, one of the police women said to me, we need to examine you. I said, examine what? I mean, that's ridiculous. You know, I have not made complaints that I have a headache or anything like that.
Even then, they can't examine you. They have to send you to a judicial medical officer.
You know, I said
Dr.
no.
Ajanta, you know, this is an election year.
Yeah.
And especially we in the media, we know that as elections get closer, the level of violence grows and, yes, it escalates. This seems to be, your incident seems to be the start of perhaps a new trend of escalation.
Exactly.
Where you have thugs assaulting people who are doing a silent protest within a few meters of temple trees itself. And the police actually walked away.
A few meters of the Kolupiti police station.
Yes. And it seems ironic that this happened at the Liberty roundabout.
Exactly.
Yes,
Liberty.
yes, and I'm not talking about the cinema, I'm talking about the word liberty.
Liberty.
What would you have to say about the level of violence, and do you fear that it will increase?
Well, yeah, because the thing is, I've never experienced this before. And then also it looks very odd how the police were behaving. You know, the police were behaving in an extremely strange way. The two police officers, the lady police officers, never came back. We were waiting for half an hour. They never came back again. So we had to include our statement together with Mr. Imran's. So the next day we went to the Women's Bureau.
The male police officers took Imran's statement.
Yeah. Okay. He took Imran's but not ours. And then
I think President's Counsel UR De Silva has quite an extensive criminal practice. Is this
Totally
an anomaly?
Totally wrong thing, because they should have then and there recorded her statement.
But there is a provision that you need a lady officer to arrest.
That is arresting.
Yes, only arresting.
Things
Searching.
like that, not
If
to
they
take
want, the
complaints.
male officer can't search them. But they have to record the statement immediately if she is ready to give the statement. Otherwise, they have to find a lady police officer and then record. By the time all things will be
and
finished.
then we went to the Human Rights Commission. Because of that, we had to go to the Human Rights Commission, because then we gave our statements to them. And then we went to the Women's Bureau, because we felt that because we were really treated and badly, we felt we need to go and make a complaint there. The moment I walked in there with Fatima again, the lady said, we cannot take your complaint because you need to know the names of the thugs, their addresses, their telephone numbers, how we could contact.
The Women's
I mean, it sounds like if you're raped, you need to ask for his ID number, you need to ask for his phone number and his name before you can make a complaint about the rape case. I mean, is this Sri Lanka? Is that true?
It is Sri Lanka,
happening.
actually.
That is
I mean,
happening.
that's the thing.
Because that's right.
Ambika, I'm a little confused. I thought Parliament makes the law and not the Kolpidi police.
Well, Parliament makes the law, everyone else disregards the law, and they all break the law, particularly public officials. Now, what Dr. Ajanta said is not new. This is something that we have seen. If you take, for instance, women victims of sexual and gender-based violence, when they go to the police, this is what they've been experiencing for decades. Particularly if it's family violence, the police try to mediate, or they refuse to take the complaint. Sometimes they take the complaint of the woman, they take the woman's telephone number, then they call her at night and they harass her. So, and if a woman, let's say, takes a protection order against a husband, partner, and the person breaches the order, turns up at her house, beats her up, they go and complain to the police. The police ask the woman, tell us where he is so we can go arrest him. Sometimes the women actually find out and they go and tell the police, and still nothing happens, and the woman, despite the protection order, is still insecure and frightened. So it is Sri Lanka, and it's been that way for a long time.
Mr. De Silva, you initially in your opening statement, you made this comment about the online safety bill and Piazza's arrest under section 122 of the penal code, how despite what law is there or not there, if the government or if
don't use the government.
If a certain arm of government or if a certain arm of the executive,
yes.
If a certain arm of the executive wants you arrested and they have the power to do it, say, for example, say the police department, if they want to arrest you, they will arrest you somehow, and there's nothing you can do about it. Is that what
No,
you're telling me?
nothing you can do about it is a different matter. But we have to think about that because fundamental right cases are there.
Okay.
So we see that a lot of fundamental right cases are there, and the Supreme Court has quite clearly stated that the police have violated the fundamental right, and they said that you have to do whatever things that are necessary to the relevant police officer.
So,
But the
Mr. De
government is
Silva,
not doing that.
Mr. De Silva,
But
no,
it's not only just the government, right? I mean, you take recently, there was instructions that were given by the Supreme Court to the National Police Commission.
That's correct. Yeah.
And we haven't heard anything of any
it's
action
been
that the
directed to
Commission
the
has been
Attorney
done.
General's
Or
for
whether-
advice, and we know how long that
So
takes.
they are expecting the advice from the government, Attorney General's department.
But how can we speed this up? Because listening to what Dr. Ajanta is saying and what Ambika is saying, not just what, I mean, obviously what women have been going through for decades, but we've seen like even ordinary people go through. Because basically, you get away from the police if you have money and power. If you don't, you're
No,
top
to
level.
some extent that is correct because
So-
everybody cannot go to Supreme Court
Yeah.
and challenge their
not everyone
violation
has
of
the access to
fundamental
the
rights.
lawyers, etc. So now I'm beginning to question what is the point of the lawyers and the legal profession, and what is the point of all of it
No,
if
to some extent,
this
I don't
if
agree with
injustice
that,
is so
because
pervasive?
You must understand that the Human Rights Commission is there to help people, and they are doing a good job. And then the other thing is, if the people doesn't have they don't have money, then they can go to our
Legal aid.
Legal aid
But
commission.
is this good enough? Because I mean, you look at, right, this was current Supreme Court, one of the Supreme Court justices, Yasantha Kodagoda, in his inauguration speech, he actually said, you know, it takes on average about 11 to 12 years for a criminal case to go through the system, from the initial point
So
of
we
arrest
have
to go
cut
through the
down
system.
that
Right?
to 8 to 6 years because
But
I am personally, you know, I can say
That's one.
Court of Appeal. Court of Appeal, we have two two benches deciding criminal appeals. Now they are doing it very well. Now,
But I
as
mean,
you say-
8 years, if you
No,
take
not
a
yet 8
victim
years.
of crime.
Don't say
Okay,
like
yeah.
that. So that's a fact at that point. But
Yeah.
now they have improved it, and we are going to do better service.
what's
But
the-
yet
what's the
there
average
are
now?
Some other things that have to looked after, because if we are going to ignore these things, people will suffer definitely. But as they say, that we have to take immediate action. Now, what is the action we are going to take? Are we going to give to the other people now, opposition people who are not conversed with the present laws also? They are not bothered about the amendments also. They are just criticizing them.
But you think the government is aware of these?
No, that's what I'm telling. They are
No,
not-
government is also not aware.
No,
Who's
I'm
aware?
Totally unaware. No. So that's
Yes,
perfectly
Africa,
right.
yeah.
But how are we going to do the next step? So are we going to change the government and give it to another people? Who are the people who are giving
But
it
that's
to the
that's
But
I mean that's
that is-
democracy, right?
that
Isn't
is-
it? You need a public mandate to do
democracy.
these
That's
changes.
correct.
Sorry,
Public
Ambika.
mandate
yeah.
in this way is a futile exercise.
But
I will
also,
tell you
Mr.
because
De Silva,
yes.
I mean,
Yeah. Yes,
it's
sir.
also about the Constitution, right? The other alternatives are actually, I mean, we don't have a real alternative. So
That's
yes,
correct.
all of us are going to have a problem when we go to the polling booths to
That's
decide
correct.
who we are
That's what
going to
I'm
vote.
telling you,
That
yes.
is a reality, but that doesn't mean, because we do respect the Constitution.
That's correct.
And the Constitution does require us to have elections.
We have the right of
Elections
franchise.
Is
That is why I'm
about
telling you, we have to change the constitution
For
and
what?
change
Oh,
the
to
laws.
what?
as
To
well.
Not to
to
have
what? To
What's the change?
To what?
To change the election laws. Otherwise,
what?
now they are at the moment, election laws have been changed. The amendment is pending. So far, nobody in the parliament is interested in bringing that.
You're saying an
is what
amendment
I
on the
just
Point
electoral
out
system.
that when the 19th Amendment came forward, it completely violated Sirisena's manifesto, because all Ranil wanted for reform was to give the president's powers to him.
Yes.
We made some amendments, but I said, what about electoral reform, which is the second pillar?
That was supposed to be in the 20th Amendment, but Parliament
no.
was prorogued.
No.
Or dissolved, rather.
Sirisena
No, they-
was bludgeoned into dissolving it. But I introduced an amendment to the 19th Amendment for electoral reform.
That's correct. Yeah.
And The Secretary General didn't allow it because in those days the Secretary General said he's very different. Unfortunately, I didn't have Karu Jayasuriya or Mahinda Yapa. So they absolutely refused to look at it. And a lot of my amendments were just laughed at. And there were only two people who took them seriously, Chamal Rajapaksa and Dinesh Gunawardena, to give him his due. The rest just were so anxious to go to bed.
That's what I'm telling you.
But I did try. And then the 20th was promised us immediately. And Mahinda Deshapriya told me, which is very simple to do, but me Ranil Eka kamati naha.
But
Ranil
Mr.
Eka
De Silva,
nawatthana.
at the end of the day, this is still the, at least in name, the Democratic Socialist Republic of Sri Lanka. So any you need, for the amendment that is talking about, at least the Yapalne government came in with that mandate to amend the constitution.
Yes.
Maybe they fell short of it, but they did have the mandate. Does the current government have a mandate to be making these legal reforms? You don't have a mandate from the people.
No, if they want, they can do it because they pass all the legislation. And how can they pass?
But they don't have the two-thirds majority to amend the constitution.
If they want, that's what I'm telling you. Perfectly right. If the other party is also willing to change the electoral system, they can give their consent, and by two-thirds majority is simple. So that is why I'm telling you, we are talking about unnecessary thing, asking election. Yes, I think it's quite correct. And she said it should be, it's a mandate, it's a mandatory requirement that people should get their franchise. That is correct. But to what extent we are going to do it?
So
we
you're
are
saying
going to change the present government and give it to somebody else.
So basically, either way,
That's
that's
democracy. We want
But Mr. De Silva,
That you are using.
so you're
that
saying
word.
democracy doesn't
But
work.
then,
What you're saying is democracy doesn't work.
No.
Decide.
You are using that word
goodness.
and trying to give it to somebody else, and then she will come here
But-
and criticize them.
but Mr. De Silva,
I don't
Mr.
But if they're
Mr.
not,
De
if they're not
Silva-
doing the job, you criticize.
Exactly.
No.
Mr.
We have the remedy for that.
No,
Mr.
we
De
have-
Silva,
No,
it
what-
is not
About
my
it.
job. It's not my job to praise them. Our purpose as citizens. Don't forget about any other hat we wear, just as citizens, because we also, we file tax returns and we do pay tax.
That's
Some
correct, yeah.
people may not, but we do that. And therefore, the purpose of criticizing is to hold them accountable because they're supposed to be public servants. So yes, when the next government after that, of course I will criticize, and that is my right, and I will do so with
Now,
glee.
Mr. Silva,
Public servants should not take it.
See, for us now, the picture that I have in my mind is the government was connected with the way that the police behaved. That's how I see it. They had orders from someone for them to withdraw at that particular point,
Right, yes.
so that the thugs could come and harass us. We would be frightened, we would walk away from it, and then they will try to suppress that same way every protest. That's what I believe was the plan, but it didn't happen. See, now in a situation like that, and if such a government exists, right, people have the right to now say we need an election in order to bring whoever we like, so that we may be able to bring about a change. That's what democracy is. We have that
Certainly
right.
it should be, but the way that is there is not the correct way of doing that, because what we are going to do is we will try to change the attire and bring the same people with another attire. So that is not correct.
But do you
We
think
have
it's
to-
the same people who
What
are
I am
going to
saying
come?
is, as she quite correctly pointed out, why are they not interested about electoral system change? So that is why. Now, what Yapal government did, he said, with regard to some elections, they try to implement it by, at the committee stage, they put lot of amendments, unnecessary amendments, and then they forget about it. So that is why we don't have provincial council election. Now here, of course, we are waiting to have in October the presidential election. So till such time, we have to see what is the present government is going on. And then at the same time, we have time to change the necessary requirements to get better people into the parliament. We see who are there. They are just, sometimes they just stand up and talk nonsense.
So, Mr. De Silva, how do you propose?
So those are the people who have to vote for the electoral reforms you're talking about.
No. That is what they are not doing it.
No, but if you're saying that they are right now
yes.
standing up and talking nonsense. And I agree with you. We saw examples of that during the debate on the online safety, right?
Yes.
Now, you're saying we need to change the system, the electoral system, before we can chase these guys out. But then you're going to rely on these guys, the guys who are standing up and talking nonsense, to change the electoral system.
What I am saying is, if the parties are ready to do that, they can do it. Remember this.
What you're saying is that if the MPs don't really have that power and that the party leadership can make the decisions, then the MPs are basically followers who will go along.
No, if they get together.
For the last 5 years, I have kept saying electoral reform, electoral reform,
That's right.
electoral
We are
reform.
talking about that.
Manohara De Silva, whom I met, I didn't want to meet these people because I realized they would do nothing. Manohara said, no, we are presenting our report in a month's time. 2 years later, the report was still not there. I mean, how could Gota appoint Ramesh De Silva as chairman?
Yeah.
Ramesh said, I don't know anything about it. I mean, he was very honest.
Again,
No, Ramesh said this.
No, I think Salan will remind you that
The names.
No, but I said Manohara promised me he'd bring this.
Because none of them are
Then
here.
I spoke to Dinesh Gunawardhan, whom I'm very fond of, and he said, no, let's work on this. I sent him proposals. He actually got Mahinda Yapabewardhan to see me. Then, of course, the Aragalai happened and it didn't. And I have to say, this is what I mean, you have to stand up. When Dinesh became Prime Minister, he did nothing. He called me and said, shall we work on this? I said, I'm sorry, Mr. Dinesh, whom I love. You cannot touch pitch and not be defiled. So long as you work for this government, I will have nothing more to do with you. I wish you luck. Free yourself from this old man of the sea on your neck now, and I will help you. But until then, I will not have anything to do with
that's
it.
a fact.
But my point
Real
is,
fact is that the
Dinesh should have pursued it because I sent him all the paper.
No, it is there. Amendments are there.
So you said the party leadership can come together, and you said, but these are the party leaders.
So one of the leaders, no. So there.
I'm not a leader.
No, then now you are not the leader.
No.
Right, anyhow.
Dinesh is the party leader and a very decent man.
What you're saying is that we need to, correct me if I'm wrong, but from what I can try, what I'm trying to understand what you mean is, okay, we have guys in parliament who don't really understand these things, but they will vote for it. If the party leadership puts it together with the
That's happening now.
With the technocrats, if they put it together and put it forward, the members of parliament, the honourable members of parliament, will vote for it. So therefore, what you're suggesting is that you get the party leadership, maybe a APRC, plus the technocrats involved to draft this legislation.
Not draft, it is there. It's there. Dinesh Gunawardhan has all the
details.
details.
Draft of the 20th Amendment from 2015 is there. You can work on that. There's also multiple other research that has been done on mixed member proportional systems, etc.
That's correct. Yeah, that's there.
So all of that is there. So you're saying let's put that all together before and let this parliament run its term through to 2025.
That's correct. The time is there. Then that is a legal time. No? So the constitution says
So you're
that they
saying
can
basically
wait.
let the president and the
But
parliament
Mr. Deshmukh,
run the
my
course of
worry
their
about
term.
this
But
is that
Now they are asking election. For what purpose?
But wait, hold on. Let me just
Unnecessary thing we are talking about.
So constitutionally, the current president,
He can wait
serving out
till October.
He can wait till October.
Okay.
The parliament can go on till I think August next year.
That's right.
Right. So you're saying we should just let this term run.
Not say if they willing to have it election prior to that, they can do it.
But you're saying get the electoral reforms in first.
And that's what I am saying.
So they already
I
have-
am
so
in
they've
that.
already-
I am
they've
in
already
that
passed.
context because if they are not going to change the electoral system, you are getting the same people.
Okay, I think I
and then
understand.
Unnecessarily, we are
Can
talking
I
about.
to say a little better
can
now,
I bring
but-
up one issue
Yeah.
here? People are sick and tired and asking for elections not because of anything else, but because of the situation in the country.
Yeah.
Economically, we don't see our country going forwards. We don't see in any way. Then we have also this aggressiveness and the violence is happening. Then we take this case of immunoglobulin. Now, Mr. Kehliya Rabukwella, his secretary, who is Chandragupta, Mr. Chandragupta has already spoken to the, when he gave his statement to the CID, he has already said that it was Mr. Kehlia Rambukwella who has given him the advice to write that minute.
Again,
I don't think that's right. Yeah. I don't think you are. No, it's not correct to say it like that because you don't know the real facts also.
Let me ask you this question, though, because you say clearly the people are asking for elections. Any opinion poll done by almost any agency or market research agency or even political think tanks, etc., point in that direction. The people are calling for elections. Now, I think just to highlight what Professor Vijay Singh was saying earlier, just a quick, the clarification that Dr. Indrajit Kumaraswamy gave on that was that he didn't say that elections should be postponed. He said that elections should not distract from the fiscal discipline that is needed in the government right now, because elections are have been a time of fiscal indiscipline. Now, we can see that fiscal indiscipline kind of creeping into the government right now as well, which means that they are preparing for potentially elections. So what I want to ask is the problems that you highlighted now, will it be solved through an election?
Yes.
I think that's what
Yes,
you are
for sure.
So
The reason
who
being-
is the party
can
was
I-
given the correct way of doing the country? So
Mr.
no,
Silva,
tell me.
I'd like to answer that question. Is this now? Let's say the Minister X, whom we are talking about right now, right? We know that he should be arrested.
No,
And that's-
I don't think now you are coming.
Okay,
now,
wait.
What
Okay, let's
the
say
change of election.
I'm only talking about this particular minister, right? Now the reason why hierarchies are not accepting that or not going through with that, because right now in the government, if that happens, there will be in the present government a split, because some will be agreeing with it, some will be disagreeing with it. So once the government splits, the whole purpose of this will be lost. The whole purpose of the parliament, like what the hierarchy wants is to have this parliament who would give him the majority votes with every bill or every
So what is
policy
the
that
alternative? That is what I am asking you.
so
Have you got the alternative with you? No, you don't have.
Is an election. You know why? Because let the people choose. We need to take
to
that
choose a particular person or party, you must be educated them and then tell them that this is the policy, this is what it's going to do, and these are the people who are kind.
Did we do all that when there was an election before?
That's what I am telling you, that we have
No, did
we
we
have
do that before?
we
No,
have that
when there was an
experience.
You see, Mr. De Silva, one of the problems we have to remember is that after we had an excellent manifesto in 2015,
yes.
Ranil destroyed it. He just ignored everything that poor Maithripala tried, and Maithripala was so
Again,
we all know that Maithripala will
The
tell
president is
I don't
not
have
here to
to tell-
defend himself.
I don't
so-
have to tell you, Maithripala will tell you, but the man was so weak until he finally, kicked against the pricks. But he was not a wicked man, I think. He was a foolish man. That's a separate issue. But the real problem that we have to face, and I will ask you this, from, as I said, I was one of the first to go against Mahinda Rajapaksa. I have the pride of saying I told him before I did so, unlike anyone else. But there were some achievements during his time in office. What have we achieved from 2015 onward? We talk about fiscal discipline. There has been no fiscal discipline. As you know, the debt got bigger and bigger from 2015 to 2020. And the interest rates we were paying increased colossally because of Arjuna Mahendra. People blame Cabral, but Cabral kept interest at 10% in his time. The minute Mahendra came in, interest shot up to 12%, and every single debt after that was at 12%. And we are borrowing more and more and more.
But
So-
just
and
a
it's continuing. Let me
quick,
just go further.
no, because just to clarify that, because we have done the research on this,
Yeah.
a lot of the, especially borrowing that had to be done, because this is the cycle of debt, right, was to service debt that had been taken for projects. Now, you had the project-based loans that were taken during Mahinda Rajapaksa's tenure. Primarily second term, but also some from his first term as president. And then when Yapane came in, once you had a better understanding of what your finances were like, you then had to get debt to service that debt.
And that also Sri Lanka's graduation from a lower middle.
Yeah, and
lower middle
No,
income.
so they were not getting
and then
interest, but
to add to that, you got into an IMF program, which President Gotabaya Rajapaksa promptly withdrew the country from in November of
yeah, but you
2019.
think, Nadine,
So this, what I'm saying is, there is fault on the part. There is maybe a portion of blame on the part of all of these figures.
Exactly.
But it doesn't. You can't condense
There's no
it into
one,
a
yeah.
single term.
no,
it
no, no,
runs
no.
over
The
multiple
point
years.
I was trying to make is you're perfectly correct that especially in the last 3 years of Mahinda Rajapaksa's second term, he got more and more grandiose, and there was no productivity in those loans. If you take Mattala, instead of writing about Mattala,
The convention center, the airport, the harbour.
yeah, etc. But the very simple fact is that Yahapalana came in knowing all this, and they pledged to do other things. But what Indudit was also telling me the other day, the whole problem is that from that time to this, there has been no effort, A, to reduce expenditure. It has got higher and higher, and that should have happened. No effort at all to recover a lot of the stolen money. All governments haven't done anything of that sort from 2015 onwards, although they all said, there has been a lot of crooked. Rajura Mahendran is still in Singapore, right? Perpetual Treasury still is doing business.
But Professor, forget about recovering the stolen monies, because now that's a crime. That's
Yeah.
a crime, and it's forbidden in law. But recently, I think the Minister of Energy, he said that now we know all the situation surrounding the CEB and how 1 million power connections were disconnected because they couldn't pay their electricity bills. That has just skyrocketed through the roof. And the reasons that we've been given is the fact that the CEB is making losses, we need cost-reflective pricing, and mind you, the cost also covers the salaries for employees, the benefits, so on and so forth, managerial costs. And now we learn,
They're making
Professor,
profit.
now we learn, Professor, that there has been a loan scheme at the CEB where they grant loans at concessionary
To the
interest rates to
employees.
their employees. Guess who pays for the concessions? 2/3 of the
CEB's
interest
customers.
on those loans that are being given to CEB employees that amounted to 12 billion, and this is coming from the minister himself, was paid by the consumers, was paid by us, was paid by the people whose lines got disconnected. They couldn't pay those interest rates anymore, so their lines got disconnected.
We know all that.
This is broad.
As you probably know, when I was secretary to a ministry, or when I was TVC, I just told my ministry, you're not appointing anyone to this place. And Mahinda Samarasinghe accepted it. I said, I'm not appointing anyone at state expense because I'm not the financial accounting officer now. And Mahinda accepted this. In the end, we compromised. I said, if there are drivers, you can put your own men, provided they have the qualifications. I won't sit on interview, but no managerial stuff, nothing. His successor got me sacked because I wouldn't appoint his people. So you're perfectly right. Because of this system of politics that we have got massive rent seeking.
I don't think it's to do with the politics. I think we are very bad managers.
No, but
We
Ajanta, I'm
have
telling you, people appoint people. When I went to Oldville many years ago, all the security guards came from Gaul. Richard Patarana was the Minister of Education. So I told the guard, "Mokadda oyagala metan kanne?" "Nෑ sir, Galla Varaye Oldville වලින් මිනිස්සු ඉන්නේ." Because what's his name? Ashraf had sent all his people there. And no longer, I mean, when I told Mahinda I'm not appointing, he said any other secretary would have done it. I said I'm not any other secretary. But the tragedy is no secretary now will stand up against their ministers,
No,
the
I
point
mean,
you made about
Well,
Kehriya secretary.
that's been a reality for a very long
No,
time.
because
Ever
it
since
just-
I think you can say that ever since
I
basically
still
the
don't
CCS,
agree with Mr.
the inner
Silva's,
CCS made with the politicization and the
Politicization of the public sector.
Of the public
I think
sector.
But can I tell you what
Removal of
happened in
permanent
2015?
secretaries.
One pledge was to depoliticize the private sector, the public sector. And everyone was appointed by the PSC except the permanent secretary.
Yeah.
So I said, why is this? And then Ranil told me, no, some good people can be appointed from outside. So I said, that's fine, it must be an exception. Maitripala told me, he didn't understand. He said, නෑ නෑ ඔයා දන්නේ නෑ බුද්ධ ශාසන ලේකම්තුමා Hari Napuru kenek Mahinda Rajapaksa pat kala.
But what
Right.
is the
So,
guarantee?
the point I'm trying to say
I'm just
is
trying
that
to
you
argue.
need to have a professional thing, and this is where, one of the reasons I find our political scientists so appalling right through this whole country is nobody has analyzed why Jaya Jayawardena, having claimed to introduce an executive presidency, did what no other executive presidency in the whole world has, which is ministers in parliament.
Yeah.
Because if you have an executive president, you must have
But I think
ministers
talking
outside.
about what happened in the past is
well,
not going to solve the
well,
problem.
but
Professor
let's
Vijay
get
Singh, let me
back
just
to-
bring it back to the question that we were asking about earlier. Right now, Mr. U.R. De Silva thinks that the problem that we need to solve with having better public representation cannot be solved through elections and a new parliament with a mandate from the people. You need to work with the technocrats and the guys that you have in parliament now to get these reforms in before the end of this parliament's term in August of 2025. Dr. Ajanta is saying that no, people are asking for elections now. You need to have an election and a fresh mandate has to be given, and these problems need to be addressed.
And also,
in the new
what
parliament.
is the guarantee that these people that you're talking
So-
about, the ones who have been there, will be re-elected?
Yeah, and Professor Vijay Singh, what I want to ask you is, where do you stand? Do you think that we need? Well, it's clear the people are asking for elections. What is your stand?
Absolutely.
Do we need to have
I totally
elections?
agree with Adanta and I think Ambika that you need an election immediately.
Yes.
But the only problem I have, I can understand Mr. De Silva's point. Has there been any evidence of any movement by anyone in government to move these reforms forward?
That's correct.
You see, if Mr. De Silva
but-
says,
But I think he's questioning again what you were
no,
saying. Right? Yeah.
Mr. De Silva's point is this government can do it. But my point is it hasn't done it. It shows no evidence of doing it. Dinesh has done nothing to promote electoral reform. You yourself and your minister have done nothing. Again, Vijayadasa Rajapaksa is a decent man, but he hasn't got an idea in his head. So you have to put those ideas into that
So,
head.
Ms. Abdullah, I want to bring that same question to you, right?
Yes, Nadeem.
on the question of mandates,
Which
because as Mr. De Silva said, in all likelihood, not just you, we'll probably be back here with a new government and doing the same thing.
Clearly, we need electoral reform, right? But whether this parliament is going to do it, clearly that is not their priority. And also, can we trust this government to do it? Because the laws that they are passing so far are laws that restrict our rights. So can we actually trust them to bring about progressive electoral reform? The other most important thing is things don't change in society because you set up a commission or because you pass a law. We have a culture here which is rather feudal. It functions on patronage. There is nepotism. So the political parties themselves are not democratic. Look at the way they function, right? About diversity within the party, gender representation, how is power distributed. So you need to change all that. You cannot change the law and imagine people are going to behave differently. Why are certain ministries the coveted ones? Because they want it because they know they can give jobs. Like Ports Authority, for instance, is coveted because historically we have seen when a minister changes, a lot of jobs suddenly, you get people appointed to that.
That's
And-
why Mangala chose ports and shipping instead of foreign.
Well, I mean, may I finish?
did.
May I-
Yeah,
may I
yeah,
finish?
go ahead.
Yes.
I'm confirming your point.
Yeah. So I think it's.
You chose the best
it's a-
example.
It's about the political culture here, and we need to change that. If you don't change that, people will elect the people who they think they have the best access to, right? And politicians are not really accessible because they don't behave like public servants. They behave like demigods.
Like
so you
feudal
think
chieftains.
feudal chieftains. So the way to get access is to also then pander to that. So you're creating this whole culture, this feudal, patronage-driven culture. That doesn't change through laws because laws, often as we have seen, don't seem to matter here, right? Supreme Court judgments don't seem to matter here. So how do you change that? I think it's also about civic education. It's about a lot of little things, right? So the reform is required, but having elections should not depend on that. Exactly. Because we do still need to respect the Constitution, we need to respect democratic processes, and democracy is messy. All of us are going to be dissatisfied at some point.
In terms of respecting the Constitution, constitutionally, this Parliament's term
we have time.
In August
we have
2025.
time to reform
this President's
these
term ends
so
in
why are
August
not
20,
why are not
August
going to
this,
do that?
sorry, October this year.
Sorry. Yeah.
So
Ajanta,
constitutionally, there is no requirement for elections right now.
Yeah,
Yes,
Dr.
sir,
Ajanta, the need for elections, which most people agree on, it comes down to something much more fundamental, isn't it? That is economic freedom, the freedom to feed oneself and one's family.
Exactly.
And just a few weeks ago, the government announced that it is increasing the number of families on Aswasuma, the welfare program, up to 2.4 million, which is a clear admission that things are going from bad to worse.
Exactly.
And therefore, the people who can't afford to feed themselves clearly would like a change. What that change would be, again, is up to how they vote.
So what we are
Anyway, with
expecting
regards
is
to the
we
question-
want to teach a lesson to the present government and elect the ask them
but
to
the
come
thing
in.
is, I think this is
I
the
don't
point.
think
The
it's
point
about
that
teaching a lesson.
And that is what we are going to do.
Well, first,
Because-
Let's get
first
Dr.
we-
Ajanta's
people
views on
first
this.
we- may
I like
yeah.
to answer
Yeah.
that question.
Yeah.
Why did the government decide to increase the number of people who would receive Aswasuma is, every government knows when you give Samurdhi or Aswasuma, those people will vote for them.
That's right.
So
it
basically
will
what
happen
the
again.
government is trying to do now is they are using every strategy in order to please people.
Yes.
Now, in order to get their votes, this is not the type of government that we want. We want a government where people are made independent, they are proud to have a job, they are proud to earn their own living, they are proud to have a good family. We want a total change of mindset, and this can only be done by the younger generation. The people who are already in the parliament, the 225, has not been able to do that. And that's why the Aragalaya came. The whole purpose of Aragalaya was not just to chase these Rajapakshas away, but it was basically also to change the way of governance. Now, all what we are saying is, up to now, the people who have governed the country have not been responsible. Look at now even the tax collection, right? I mean, inland revenue, they are collecting taxes. But they are only collecting 15% of the taxes from the people. I mean, 15% of the population only from whom they are collecting the taxes. So we still have 4 trillion to collect. And then they introduce the VAT in order to compensate for that. So what I'm saying is bad governance. And this is why people are saying they need an election. It may not work out fantastic, but yet the Constitution allows through this democracy that the people have the right to vote and elect someone else if they are not pleased with the present government. We need to give them that option.
Yes, you have to give that option. Before that, you have to be prepared. Merely because you want to teach the government and trace the government now, that does not mean we will solve the problem. It will come to worse situation.
But then,
I
Mr.
will say.
Mr. De Silva, you said that no political party has come forward and put out a program.
That's right.
And told, this is the path that we're going to take.
And Professor Rajiv Vijayasinghe mentioned quite correctly that there is no evidence that the sitting government or any of the parties involved in it have taken any meaningful steps or shown any indication that they plan to adopt or implement the kind of reforms that you want,
Yes.
which is the kind of reforms that a lot of us
And
want as well.
also the current government hasn't really put forward a plan and
in
told the
which-
people this is
in which case
they
should
have
you-
already shown
They're doing
them.
it. No, they're
But
doing it.
That's right. They
They're
are
not-
doing
they're not-
it.
they're not putting it
People
forward
will
to the
not
people.
accept. My doctor will not accept that program. But the fact remains, they have done something
No, but-
which we might say
can I
is not
point
so
out
but
something?
this is my-
When I was chairing the TVC, I set up some councils, and the manufacturing people told me, how can we scope things because this country has no industrial policy. And this country has no industrial policy because successive governments appointed Vishad Badruddin as Minister of Industries.
No, he is talking about 2015.
Now what has happened, in all fairness, I think Vimal Veeravansa created some sort of policy. But the last few accounts I read about it, poor old Ramesh Patirana is talking about the car industry. All his points are about how we are going to have manufacturing cars and spare parts and all. I mean, he's in cloud cuckoo land. No? We need to create small industries. We need to provide employment in rural areas. We need to have marketing strategies for the poorer people.
This is why we need a new government.
And you know, Ramesh, who's one of the brightest people in the government. Where is his industrial policy?
That's correct.
Just to bring it back
the important things.
Yeah, no, but just to bring it back to this question of like whether we should have elections now, right? And like there's a bit of a contradiction there because you just said one, you agree that sure there's no indication that any of these parties are doing this, but you're conditional on elections being held after these reforms have been held. Then you said, look, the parties there is discussion, but nothing has been made public yet. Earlier in the program today, we were talking about how, people are not being consulted on laws.
That's right.
So you're going to bring, you're going to rely on parties to bring electoral reforms without consultation.
No, there was consultations, and thereafter.
You're talking about consultations that happened in the past.
Yes. The same people were there in the country.
On electoral reform.
Electoral system.
I was talking about everything else.
No, the electoral system was drafted after consulting various authorities.
So
that's what
they are. Election monitors, multiple people consulted.
Safely.
That's all. Those consultations happened 2015. Now eight years ago, right?
We are talking proper things we should talk because now 8 years or 10 years is a different matter. If there are amendments to be done, you can do it. But have you heard any of the parties, opposition side, they talk about the electoral system?
Read my Facebook. I have put my presidential manifesto on it, and I have now refined it, and every week I am introducing, because no one will read it, that doesn't matter, not even wonderful people like you, but read it, and you will see a whole comprehensive electoral reform system, a whole comprehensive system of reducing the power of politicians. So we continue with provincial councils, but elected through the Pradeshya Sabhas, because we don't want several layers of elected politicians. We want devolution closer to the people. So the Pradeshya Sabha is the key now. But the provincial council should be elected collegiately. So you lay out elections. But there's one thing that I think, and I don't have time to do it now, but one of the things we've all mentioned is the need for better education. Ambika talked of civic education. You talked about an elected. And one of the saddest things, we were discussing this earlier, is the complete lack of a modern educational policy.
I think general public should be given some education on the law as well.
Yeah, that's right. I'm telling you. So now what they say is that they are going to introduce the necessary laws to the curriculum of the education.
Can I just
ask? We did have a subject called life competencies when I was schooling.
In school.
Just a few years ago.
No, and when we redid the syllabus for it,
but
except that Susil Premchand just destroyed everything we did, we introduced the whole concept. No, Taradi Mel's time was excellent. We introduced the whole concept of civic responsibility, of thinking skills. The book we produced, in fact, I'm very pleased, Cambridge University Press came to me and said, your curriculum is so good. Can we do the book for this?
Okay,
because
can I just
the whole
say
thing. But none of that is there now.
Okay, Saubhagya Dakma, how good was that?
Worse. Because we thought,
Dakma.
now, as she quite correctly pointed out, we thought they will do a good job. And what happened next? Then they ruined the whole system. So that's why I'm saying from 2015, there are examples up to 2020.
Why I asked you that question is this.
Yes.
Sri Lankans are very good at putting forward manifestos and ideas and promises.
So without
we are
doing
very good at that.
Yes.
And
but we are very
laws
good
also.
at not keeping those promises. So what I believe is we need to give opportunity for a new set of people to come forward And if we do not, at the moment, I know there are a lot of people who are very interested in politics, young people who are coming up. And if we give them I mean, of course, we need to help them out, in
That's what I'm
knowledge
telling you.
with people
There,
like you.
there is time.
But
Help them and bring them.
But we need to give them that right for elections.
By merely appointing them to parliament is not going to solve problem. You educate them. You help them.
Mr. Silla, what's the difference between having people in the parliament right now who can't even read and write?
That's why we are
and they
asking
don't
them to go.
even if they are given a document, they don't read and write it. Read it.
So,
why don't we bring
I think that's the tactical side of Mr. De Silva coming into play. He wants to use the deficiencies in the system to try and put forward progressive reforms.
Whether they choose to read or write is a
But there is a good percentage.
No, reading means reading and understand.
Understand also.
I think they can read the letters.
So let's give a new bunch an opportunity.
Yes, certainly. I am also in agreement with you. But who are the people we are going to elect?
They
who are the...
declare the elections.
They will come.
Mr. De Silva, maybe you should run for office.
I think we could discuss these matters, of course, for
but we need to stop now.
One more.
Yes, definitely, Naresh.
Yes, a couple of weeks ago we did on this show ask all the political parties to please come forward with their manifestos. And we unfortunately haven't received any yet, and we will continue to ask because we ourselves can read and write, and we certainly will present all
I'll
of them.
send you my 2019 manifesto.
But we can't depend on those manifestos now, because you know what I believe is
ask Dr. Ajanta to bring those young people to here and ask them to give us the opportunity to question them. That's all.
And I
we
firmly
love
believe people make good manifestos. People produce wonderful documents just like the Saubhagya Dakma, but at the end of it, what happened? He ran away with the Saubhagya Dakma. So we don't want another situation like that. But I know for sure, there are people, young people who are ready with brilliant ideas for this country, and we need to encourage that.
Please.
And the other thing is, if people want, in a democratic country, if people want an election, give them the election. Why fear? What is the big fear?
And another reason that we would like the parties to come forth with their manifestos is that then we would really believe that they are all coming forward for elections and not trying to postpone them.
All I really want right
you're
now
right
is for a
in that
party
sense,
to
why don't you show them your
draft of an
2019
omnibus
manifesto?
bill that will repeal.
Give them your own manifesto.
All the laws. Oh yeah, we'd love that.
That's. I'm not going to shoot for the stars. All I want is a
Just
simple
that,
omnibus
Nadir.
bill that basically repeals all of it.
Let's think positively and bring a change.
Thank you very much to our journalists and, of course, our panelists, but we're not done yet. We're going for the closing statements. I can only allot 2 minutes to each of our panelists, of course, due to the time constraints that we're currently experiencing. I'd like to start off with Ambiga Gunanathan, former commissioner at the Human Rights Commission of Sri Lanka and a member of the UN Voluntary Trust Fund for Torture Victims.
Closing statement. I think, in response to what Mr. U.R. De Silva has said, the reason that people are asking for elections is not because they want to take revenge, because most people have their lives and they're not politically motivated. It is because they find, for instance, the government is not paying enough attention to social protection because of the crisis. And we know that when you implement an IMF program, the devastating social impacts that it could have. So you do need to address them. They have the Asvesma program, but I know that there are many shortcomings in that. We've had, reports about malnutrition, increasing poverty, etc. So when the government is not listening to the people, that's when people say enough. The second thing is all these repressive laws. Now, for instance, every time someone has a protest, whether it's SJB, JVP, students, why on earth do they have to waste state resources to go get a court order and then use water cannons, etc.? Just let people protest. Why are they so petrified and wasting resources that we do not have? That is another reason people are afraid that they're restricting civic space. They're bringing the anti-terrorism, law. They're bringing the online safety bill, the NGO law, to restrict civic space. So people are afraid that this government is becoming increasingly authoritarian. And when you have discontent, People are not allowed to express themselves. There is poverty, so their daily life is, appalling. It's very difficult and challenging. Is when you also have social discontent, right? There will be no social cohesion, and that is what leads to violence.
Anarchy.
So, anarchy, and well, not anarchy, but definitely violence, at the social level. So the government should at least have a sense of self-preservation. But the fact that they do not, and they're arrogant enough, I think is also the sense of impunity, where they think despite whatever they do, because of the political culture, that they will be re-elected.
Thank you very much. Ambika Sadgurunathan, former Commissioner at the Human Rights Commission of Sri Lanka. We now move our attention to Dr. Ajanta Pereira, former presidential candidate and activist, for your closing statement.
Yeah, I think what the people in this country are crying out for is a healthy country. A country where they're born for them to live well with their families. They want economic growth, they want good schooling for their children, they want good jobs, and they want to feel safe in this country. People are not asking for a lot. But today what we can see is people do not have the ability to speak out what they believe in. They cannot assemble together and raise their opinions. And then at the same time, they go to the supermarkets or they go to the shop and find that 1 kilo of carrots is 2,500 rupees. And so people are so disheartened. They do not know what the future holds. And so today we have a situation in the country where people are so scared, they can't talk, and they are hungry because they can't afford to buy things, and they are worried about their children because they do not know whether they'll be able to afford the schooling here or whether they need to send their children out. So we do not have a nation called Sri Lanka right now. We have a country where people are living fearfully, and every day they are talking about what will happen in the future. So we need hope in this country. We need justice. The most important thing for a person when they get up in the morning is to know that they can walk down the road and the people who are governing the country would do the right thing for them. Wouldn't it be wonderful to have a government where they believe in justice, correctness, transparency, accountability? Wouldn't it be fantastic to have such a country? Wouldn't it be fantastic to have people in the parliament who do not care about themselves but about the people? Isn't that the country we are longing for? Our hearts go out in order to have a wonderful country like that. And that's what we need. So my biggest prayer for this country is, people would begin to learn how to elect the right people, how to be responsible voters. This is so important. And at the same time, at the moment, all this aggressiveness which I myself have experienced, and now I know what it's like. It's a fearful thing. So, the president should understand this. He's the president right now. At least he's been the president for 1.5 years, I believe. He needs to understand that people are crying out, saying, give us an election so they might vote for him, they might vote for someone else, but it doesn't really matter. That's the way he should look at the people, giving them what they're asking for. And at the end of the day, he can say, I have done the right thing for my own people. And this is beautiful because for me personally, being a presidential candidate in the past, I can see that the people are longing for a nation where they know they can call Sri Lanka a proud country, where they can go around the world and say, my country is good, my government is looking after me, my hierarchies are correct, my police are looking after me, they're not beating me up. This is the world that we want to create.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Ajanta Pereira. Well, as far as giving people what they want or what they're asking for, sometimes it can go south, because there was a time in the recent past in Sri Lanka where people asked for Kanna Natat Inna Ratak. Well, we have that now. And well, You be the judge of whether that's what we really want. But however, thank you very much, Dr. Ajanta Pera, for those very emotive thoughts on what Sri Lanka could be or what Sri Lanka should be. We now move our attention, of course, to President's Counsel UR De Silva, Chairman of the Bureau of Rehabilitation, Advisor to the Ministry of Justice, and also former President of the Bar Association of Sri Lanka, for your closing statement.
Chad, may I say this? Now, we must know our Constitution says that election will be held on a particular day, and the president election is going to have in October. So are we ready to go for that? Before that, we are asking election. Right now, we are not ready with the present situation. We are suffering, and we are trying to come out with the things that had happened earlier. But at the moment, we are asking election. Who are we going to elect? So it's the same people, as I told you again and again, without changing the system of voting, we will go there. Nobody is there in the list, and the so-called parties will, and then now the various groups have formed parties. Now what will happen to the parliament? We will have a parliament where nobody has the majority. Then what will happen? Dr. Ajanta and my friend, lady friend will come and say, oh, we are going to criticize. I don't think it is correct. It is not proper way of doing it. We have criticized two governments, 2015, as he said quite correct, 2015 to 2019, what they have done. Then thereafter, before that also, they said Yahapalne, and then as she asked, the Gotabaya Rajapaksa's manifesto, they produced these things, and we believe that. So we are not going to believe again without a proper way of presenting it. Firstly, I will say my personal view, we have to educate them and then tell them this is what our country needs. And you people, as she said, the young people, if they are ready to come and do that, if they are ready to go and sabotage and then set fire to the government institution, they are not called the correct people. If they are ready to do so, we are not going to tolerate them. So we know that some people are aggressive. Merely because they are ready to come forward, that does not mean we will give vote and elect them to the parliament. We have to understand this is a democratic country and governed by the parliament. And our main person is the president. If you are going to change the system, then do it. But at the moment, what I say is, if we are not going to change the electoral system, you will not get the correct people into our parliament, and thereafter you will suffer again and again. Elections should be there, and it will have it in the correct way, and the proper way it should be done. And if they are not going to postpone it indefinitely, people will say, criticize them, and then they will protest. The so-called protests are entertained as far as they are not violent. So what I'm saying is, we can't change the direction of the wind, but if we adjust ourselves, we can go to our destination. Thank you.
Thank you very much, President's Counsel UR De Silva. Finally, we move our attention to Professor Rajiva Vijayasinghe, former State Minister.
Thanks. I think we should just focus very quickly on what is the purpose of government. It seems to me that government has two basic obligations. The first is to provide security to the people. And I think we are all universally agreed, Shirasa most of all, that this government is only providing security to itself. And there is a lot of assaults on people. Ajanta gave us some graphic descriptions of what's going on. Ambika mentioned, and I think she's perfectly right, the way women in distress suffer, and they're now ignored, unlike the days when Erikilla Parachi or Dara Vijayatilaka were secretaries of ministries, and they did a good job in those days. Women now, when she said she went to the Women's Bureau and was chased out. So there's no security provided. Government is only concerned with its own security. But the second most important issue that a government must do is it requires to empower its people. And you empower your people first by giving them the freedom to live their lives, speak, work, etc. That's not there anymore. Instead of empowering people and opening the world out, we are restricting people more and more. Poverty is spreading. Jobs are getting scarcer. The education system is getting more and more restrictive. You know, I had one of my former students, well, not one, several are going. One of them, who's doing very well, said to me, you know, now he's doing so well, a lot of his money goes on tax, 1/3. But he said, I don't mind paying taxes, but what do I get for it? My children don't get any education. There's no proper health service. Now, when you pay high taxes, you have a right to expect at least basic education. Instead, we have more and more restrictions on education. English medium, which we started 25 years ago, is now getting more and more difficult. People have to go for tuition. So instead of people being empowered, they're being impoverished. Impoverished intellectually, impoverished physically, impoverished in terms of, you know, the right to live their own lives. So I think in such a context, the government really has to bite the bullet and realize, you know, Mr. De Silva said constitutional election is mandated in 2025. But because we have a silly system, unlike in America where presidential system is fixed terms, Judge Ahudna said you can have elections when you like. So we can have a presidential election now. It's not unconstitutional.
Yeah.
We can have a parliamentary election now. And given what the people feel, and given that the government is not governing, no security except security for the government, no empowerment, no improvement of the lives of people, restricted education, a health service that is unbearably corrupt and collapsing all the time, it is time to go. They must make that choice. They won't. They will hang on until they think they can bribe enough people to win. But I think people need a change. And I think there's absolutely no doubt that whatever comes will be better than what we have. It may not be ideal, but it will certainly be better than this utterly restrictive regime that is piling up corruption upon corruption at all levels.
Thank you very much, Professor Rajiva Vijayasinghe, former State Minister. Once again, a big thank you to all members of the panel for joining us today and, of course, educating our viewers on these pressing matters of state. And given that this is an election year, of course, there will come a time when you must cast your vote. And I believe our hope and prayer for, on behalf of everyone present here today, is that you, our viewers and the citizens of this beautiful country, make an informed choice. Thank you very much to our journalists, Nadeem Majid and, of course, Niresh Eliathambi, for asking all the right questions. And thank you to all our viewers out there for tuning in to another episode of Face the Nation. Until we meet again, take care and God bless.